July 2025, as the world kept its eyes on bigger powers and global flashpoints, a nearly forgotten territorial conflict suddenly erupted in Southeast Asia between Cambodia and Thailand. The fighting, though brief, was intense. Rockets, drones, and artillery lit up the skies across the borderlands, and entire villages were emptied as thousands fled. But behind this shocking burst of violence lies a deeper story, one rooted not in modern military ambition, but in old colonial maps, nationalist pride, and wounds that were never truly healed. What seemed like a sudden war was actually a century in the making. To understand how Cambodia and Thailand reached the brink of war, we must travel back to 1907. At that time, much of Southeast Asia was under colonial rule, and Cambodia was governed by the French. In that year, the French and Siamese governments signed a treaty that aimed to define their territorial boundaries. As part of that process, French surveyors drew up a series of maps, one of which placed the Preah Vihear Temple, an ancient and sacred structure, inside Cambodian territory. For the Cambodians, that temple, built during the height of the Khmer Empire in the 9th century, was a symbol of their ancient cultural legacy. But for the Siamese modern-day Thailand, it was a painful loss. Many Thais believed the temple had always belonged to them. In the decades that followed, that one map became the centerpiece of national arguments. The temple remained under Thai control for years, despite the map's claim. In 1954, after the French withdrew from Indochina, Thai forces occupied the temple once again. Cambodia responded by taking the matter to the International Court of Justice, ICJ. In 1962, the ICJ ruled in Cambodia's favor, declaring that the Preah Vihear Temple and its immediate surroundings belonged to Cambodia. Thailand was ordered to withdraw its troops. On paper, the matter was settled. In reality, it was far from. The court's ruling did not address the land surrounding the temple, and that's where the trouble lingered. Both sides interpreted the boundaries differently. While Cambodia claimed not just the temple, but also the surrounding plateau, Elaine insisted that only the temple structure itself had been transferred. This small but symbolically charged disagreement continued to fuel political tensions. For decades, in 2008, when the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, designated the temple a World Heritage Site under Cambodia's name, protests erupted in Thailand. Nationalists felt betrayed, accusing their government of surrendering Thai soil. Minor skirmishes broke out. Soldiers were deployed. The border bristled with landmines and checkpoints. Though neither country wanted full-scale war, neither was willing to back down. The situation remained a low-boil crisis for over a decade. Governments changed, agreements were made and broken. But by early 2025, it seemed that the dispute had finally settled into uneasy silence. Then, something changed. By mid-2025, tensions that had simmered quietly between Cambodia and Thailand began to rise again. But this time, the spark wasn't just about territory. It was about pride, politics, and something far more modern: control of natural resources, and influence over foreign infrastructure projects. What began as a border patrol standoff quickly escalated into one of the most serious military clashes between the two countries in decades. It started with the construction of a new Cambodian military outpost just a few kilometers from the disputed zone near the Dangrek Mountains. Thai intelligence had reportedly warned of Cambodian troop movements in the area, interpreting them as a provocation. Cambodia, for its part, claimed it was simply fortifying its legal territory and accused Thailand of illegally flying surveillance drones into Cambodian airspace. Within days, both sides began reinforcing their positions with troops and heavy artillery. By July 22nd, the first exchange of live fire took place, a brief but deadly clash that left several soldiers injured. On both sides, the world barely noticed, but locals did. Families living near the border evacuated overnight. What made this new conflict more dangerous than those before was the use of modern battlefield technology. Drone footage emerged online, some released unofficially on social media showing military installations being struck by precision-guided weapons. This wasn't just a border misunderstanding. This was a message. It didn't take long before both governments issued harsh statements accusing one another of aggression. Cambodian state media described the incident as an act of sovereignty, while Thailand's defense ministry labeled it a direct threat to regional stability. It was clear the 2025 clash was different. It had the makings of a real war. But the real question on everyone's mind was, why now? Analysts believe multiple factors converged to reignite the conflict. For Cambodia, it was about internal politics. Prime Minister Hun Manet, son of longtime leader Hun Sen, faced criticism for being too soft on foreign policy. A firm stance against Thailand would help him consolidate power and unite the nationalist base. On the other hand, Thailand's military-backed government, still recovering from months of domestic protests, saw the border dispute as an opportunity to rally public support and shift the national conversation away from economic grievances. At the same time, both countries were also entangled in broader regional dynamics. China's growing influence in Southeast Asia played an unspoken role. Cambodia has long been a key ally of Beijing, receiving billions in infrastructure investments under the Belt and Road Initiative. Thailand, while historically close to the West, has also increasingly leaned towards China. This growing rivalry over who controls trade routes, rivers, and ports has added invisible pressure along the Thai-Cambodian border. Behind every troop movement lies the shadow of larger powers. As the world finally took notice, urgent calls for peace began pouring in from ASEAN leaders, the United Nations, and international human rights groups. But it was the people living in the crossfire who suffered most. Over 12,000 civilians were displaced during the fighting in just 5 days. Local schools were shut. Entire villages became ghost towns. Farmers who had tilled the land for generations suddenly found themselves surrounded by landmines and tanks. By July 26th, both sides were at a crossroads: escalate or negotiate. And in that moment of uncertainty, the real peacemakers arrived, not through missiles, but through diplomacy. On July 27th, just days before the situation threatened to spiral into a full-blown war, a breakthrough came, not from military commanders, but from quiet diplomatic channels. It wasn't the United States or China that stepped in first. Surprisingly, it was Indonesia and Vietnam, two ASEAN powerhouses, that took the lead. Behind closed doors in a temporary diplomatic summit in Jakarta, Cambodian and Thai officials were brought to the table. The urgency was clear. If this conflict didn't stop now, the cost would be unbearable for all of Southeast Asia. The ceasefire agreement was officially signed on July 28th. The language of the agreement was cautious. Words like de-escalation, buffer zone, and non-aggression protocol replaced direct accusations. Each side agreed to withdraw troops at least 5 kilometers from the contested border and allow neutral ASEAN peacekeeping observers to patrol the zone. The ceasefire was not a resolution, it was a bandage. But in that moment, it was enough to stop the bleeding. But who actually brokered the deal? According to insiders, it was Vietnam's foreign minister who delivered the ultimatum: either agreed to a ceasefire or face isolation within ASEAN. Indonesia, chairing the emergency summit, warned of trade and aid freezes if the conflict continued. The message was clear. This wasn't just about two countries anymore. This was about protecting regional credibility, trade routes, and the future of ASEAN unity. Under that pressure, both Bangkok and Phnom Penh blinked. The guns fell silent. For now, as news of the ceasefire spread, the mood across border towns shifted from panic to cautious hope. Evacuated families began returning to their homes. Soldiers stood down, though their weapons remained within reach. Local officials warned civilians not to cross into buffer zones until full clearance by peace observers. But for the first time, in a week, the night was quiet. No gunfire, no drones, just the sound of wind passing through the forest canopy. Still, the scars were fresh. Over 15 lives were lost in the brief conflict. Hundreds injured, infrastructure damaged, thousands of villagers displaced. Aid organizations rushed in with food, blankets, and medical supplies. Yet the emotional wounds, especially among those who lost loved ones, would take far longer to heal. This ceasefire wasn't the end of anything. It was the start of something more complicated, the question of what comes next. Because despite the calm, the deeper issues remained unresolved. The Preah Vihear temple dispute was still a legal and historical landmine. Nationalist groups on both sides began criticizing their governments for bowing to pressure. And many analysts warned, without a long-term solution, this fragile peace could collapse overnight. The real fear? That next time it won't just be a border skirmish, it could be a proxy war. Even before the smoke had cleared from the jungles along the border, whispers of foreign involvement had already begun circulating. Analysts across the region started asking, was this really just a local dispute or part of something bigger? Because in Southeast Asia, nothing happens in isolation anymore. The moment bullets fly, superpowers start watching closely, or intervening quietly. Enter China and the United States, two rivals already locked in a global chess match, both with interests in Cambodia and Thailand. For Beijing, Cambodia has long been a loyal ally. Billions of dollars in infrastructure, projects, direct military training, and political alignment have made Phnom Penh one of China's closest regional partners. Meanwhile, Thailand, a key military ally of the US and host of joint military drills, leans the other way. When tensions rose, China called for restraint. But observers noted an increase in PLA advisors arriving quietly in Cambodia. At the same time, US intelligence aircraft circled over northern Thailand, monitoring troop movements. While both superpowers publicly supported peace, their private moves told another story. Behind closed doors, US diplomats pressured Thailand not to escalate. China, in turn, promised increased aid to Cambodia if it showed strategic patience. In truth, neither wanted war, not because they cared about peace, but because war could disrupt global supply chains, oil routes, through the Gulf of Thailand. And the Silk Road projects that both powers were investing in, ASEAN, meanwhile, tried to maintain the image of unity, but the cracks were obvious. During the emergency summit, Laos remained silent, not wanting to upset China. The Philippines expressed concern but focused more on their own maritime tensions with China. Only Indonesia, Vietnam, and Malaysia took active mediation roles. The event exposed ASEAN's weakness. It was only strong when its members agreed. In crisis, national interest took over. Despite all this, the ceasefire held thanks not to military deterrence, but to mutual exhaustion and outside pressure. And as calm settled over the borderlands, foreign media quickly shifted focus to other headlines. But inside Southeast Asia, leaders knew this wasn't over. Cambodia's prime minister accused foreign-backed Thai elites of undermining the peace.
I'll say.
Thai opposition leaders claimed Beijing's hand was too visible in Phnom Penh's aggression. The tension had merely gone underground, and here lies the real danger: unresolved conflict. Fueled by nationalism and quietly influenced by foreign powers, is like a volcano under the surface. It doesn't erupt immediately, but when it does, the damage is 10 times worse. So the region watches. The world watches. The people who live near that ancient, beautiful temple, once a symbol of culture and unity, now sleep with one eye open, wondering if peace is real or just the space between two wars. To truly understand why this border conflict refuses to die, you have to go back not just years, but centuries. At the center of this fragile peace stands a monument. Preah Vihear Temple, a stunning ancient Khmer sanctuary perched atop a cliff, older than most nations in Asia. But behind its beauty lies bloodshed, politics, and deep-rooted national pride. For Cambodia, the temple is a sacred symbol of Khmer heritage, a proud reminder of a golden empire that once ruled vast parts of Southeast Asia. For Thailand,
However,
it's complicated. While the International Court of Justice ruled in 1962 that the temple belonged to Cambodia, Thailand never fully accepted the decision. The issue became less about land and more about national identity, each side teaching generations that the other had stolen something sacred. The situation exploded in 2008 when UNESCO declared the temple a World Heritage Site with Cambodia as the official custodian. Thailand erupted in protest. Nationalists took to the streets. The military fortified the border. What should have been a celebration of culture became a trigger for artillery fire. Between 2008 and 2011, skirmishes along the cliffs became a deadly routine. Soldiers dug trenches near ancient carvings, exchanged sniper fire in sight of tourists, and turned a monument of peace into a front line. And it wasn't just military units fighting. Propaganda machines on both sides fueled hatred. Cambodian radio called Thai forces invaders. Thai newspapers called Cambodia puppets of China. The internet became a war zone too, with fake news, doctored images, and viral posts, designed to provoke rage. In 2013, another ICJ ruling tried to settle the dispute again, affirming Cambodia's rights over surrounding areas. But Thailand still didn't budge. Elections came and went, governments changed, but the soldiers stayed, patrolling the same paths, manning the same bunkers, staring each other down through binoculars. Even when the guns went silent, the mistrust never left. So when this latest 2025 clash erupted, it didn't surprise anyone familiar with the region. It was Dacia Vu, the same hills, the same rhetoric, the same ancient stone caught in a modern storm. And while ceasefires come and go, the question remains: can peace ever last when history hasn't been forgiven or forgotten? 'Cause as long as both nations tie their pride to one structure, as long as politicians use that pride to fuel patriotism, the border will always be a wound waiting to reopen. While governments argue and soldiers patrol, it's the civilians, the farmers, children, and shopkeepers who suffer in silence. Along the Cambodian-Thai border, entire villages sit in the shadow of this unresolved war. Made of stone, but of bamboo and tin, walls too thin to stop a bullet, too fragile to shelter families when artillery shells begin to fall. Every few years, the silence is broken. Suddenly, the sound of boots echoes through the fields. Families abandon their crops, children are pulled out of schools, and people flee toward makeshift shelters built deep in the jungle. In just a few hours, a quiet farming life transforms into a scene from a war zone. And then, when the soldiers leave and the headlines move on, the villagers return, not because it's safe, but because they have nowhere else to go. The economic damage is just as devastating. When the border heats up, trade routes shut down. Small businesses that rely on cross-border customers are wiped out. Local tourism, once a booming industry around Priya Vihar, vanishes overnight. Tour guides become construction workers. Souvenir sellers beg for aid. Guest houses close, one by one, as travel advisories from foreign embassies flood in. And yet, the people endure. In villages like Osmak on the Cambodian side, or Sisaket on the Thai side, locals have developed a hardened resilience. They've built underground bunkers. They've trained their children to distinguish the sound of a rifle from a rocket. Some have even formed community peace groups, trying to foster dialogue. Where governments have failed, there are stories of friendship too, rare, fragile, but real. Thai and Cambodian farmers sharing water during droughts. Border police from opposite sides helping a pregnant woman cross safely. A Cambodian monk blessing Thai villagers during a shared festival. These moments don't make it to the news. They are reminders that the conflict is political, not always personal. Still, the trauma lingers. Every ceasefire is met with anxiety, not relief. Every peace deal is seen as temporary. People live on edge, with packed bags under their beds and radios tuned to border updates. They've seen it all before. Until something changes at the highest levels of power, they know they'll see it again. This isn't just a dispute over stone and soil. It's a battle for peace in the hearts of those who've only ever known the sound of marching boots and political betrayal. This isn't just a fight between two neighbors over a border. It's It's a square on the global chessboard, and the world's biggest players are watching closely. From Washington to Beijing, from Tokyo to Brussels, powerful eyes are trained on that fragile stretch of land between Cambodia and Thailand. Why? Because in a world increasingly defined by influence, any instability in Southeast Asia sends ripples across oceans. Cambodia, over the years, has drawn closer to China, accepting billions in infrastructure investments and military support. Thailand, while officially neutral, has long been a strategic partner of the United States, with American troops training alongside Thai forces in regular joint exercises. This subtle alignment has turned the border conflict into a silent proxy for East, West-West. When tensions flared in 2008, both Beijing and Washington responded not with weapons, but with diplomatic posturing. Behind closed doors, they urged, but their motives weren't entirely altruistic. China saw an opportunity to tighten its grip on Cambodia. The U.S., wary of losing ground in Asia, looked to stabilize Thailand's role as a regional anchor. In between these giant stands, ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which prides itself on peaceful cooperation and mutual respect. But even ASEAN, for all its principles, has struggled to resolve the Cambodia-Thailand crisis. Repeated attempts to mediate have ended in vague communiques and temporary smiles. The truth: ASEAN has no enforcement power. And when nationalism burns hot, words are rarely enough. Then there are the economic stakes. That border region, once seen as a forgotten jungle zone, is now part of a much larger vision. The Pan-ASEAN Railway, the Belt and Road Initiative, and massive oil and gas exploration zones. Roads, pipelines, and fiber cables are already planned. To cut through the area, no country, not even a global superpower, wants that project delayed or derailed. This is why the ceasefire that began on July 29, 2025, wasn't just the result of Cambodia and Thailand sitting down. It came after intense behind-the-scenes pressure from multiple embassies, think tanks, and intelligence circles. Some even suggest a quiet phone call from Beijing to Phnom Penh sealed the deal, while Washington gently nudged Bangkok to step back. But such peace, when brokered by foreign interests, is fragile. It can hold for a year, or collapse in a month. Because while superpowers may influence borders on maps, it's nationalism and history that decide what happens on the ground. For now, there is quiet. It's not peace, just quiet. As the clock struck midnight on July 29, 2025, the ceasefire between Cambodia and Thailand officially went into effect. The border zone, which had echoed with gunfire for days, was suddenly still. No more mortar flashes lighting up the night sky. No more frantic radio transmissions, no more soldiers sprinting through trenches. Just silence and 100 eyes watching from bunkers, waiting to see if it would last. But this ceasefire wasn't born out of trust. It was born out of exhaustion, international pressure, and the heavy weight of history pulling both sides back from the edge. The temporary halt came after a series of intense behind-the-scenes negotiations, notably by ASEAN diplomats, with additional mediation efforts from Japan and the United Nations. Both Cambodia and Thailand knew, if this continued, the war wouldn't stay local. It would spill into the economy, into regional alliances, into their already fragile political systems. The question isn't if peace has returned. The real question is, how long will it hold? Because the roots of this conflict run deep, much deeper than a skirmish in 2025. The Priya Vihar Temple, the ancient Hindu site at the heart of this dispute, is more than just stone and history. It's a symbol. For Thailand, it's a painful reminder of territorial loss. For Cambodia, it's a hard-won victory that must be defended at all costs. In 1962, the International Court of Justice ruled that the temple belonged to Cambodia. But that ruling never erased the tension. It only buried it under decades of political spin, border flare-ups, and nationalism. That's why, even now, when things seem to spiral into chaos so fast, it didn't surprise the older generation. It'd seen it before. In fact, if you talk to locals living near the border, many will tell you, this wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last. In 2008, 2011, And now again in 2025, this border has burned with the fire of unresolved history. Even though the weapons have changed, the arguments haven't. Maps are still disputed. Flags are still challenged. Old colonial lira lines drawn by the French continue to haunt the present. And every time a new government takes power, especially if it needs to prove its strength to the people, the border issue gets stirred up again. That's what some experts say happened this time. Cambodia, in the midst of a major internal political transition, saw its new leadership wanting to reaffirm control and legitimacy. Thailand, grappling with protests and economic dissatisfaction, leaned into nationalist sentiment. One spark and the border lit up. But here's the thing, ... This war wasn't just about geography. It was about pride, legacy, national identity, and that's what makes this ceasefire so fragile. Because neither side has truly walked away feeling victorious. Both lost lives, equipment, reputation. Both had to bow slightly to international pressure. Neither side got exactly what it wanted, which means the seeds of the next conflict are still there just beneath the surface. Right now, both armies remain stationed in defensive readiness. Troops haven't been fully pulled back. Demilitarized zones are being negotiated, but implementation is slow. There are reports of sporadic violations already, unconfirmed, but worrying. This is not a peace where soldiers shake hands and trade water bottles. This is a peace with fingers still on triggers. Meanwhile, ASEAN is racing against time. They've proposed a joint Cambodia-Thailand border commission, aiming to permanently settle map disputes, install buffer zones, and initiate confidence building measures. The idea is to prevent rogue commanders or nationalist political groups from dragging the countries back into war. But the commission's success depends on two things: patience and politics. And in this region, both can shift overnight. There are also calls for cultural diplomacy, efforts to bring people together, not just soldiers apart. Some voices suggest creating a shared heritage zone around the Preah Vihear temple, jointly managed and open to both Cambodians and Thais. A beautiful idea, but hard to achieve when both nations still carry scars. For now, the people on both sides of the border are just trying to heal. Farmers are returning to damaged fields. Kids are going back to school, some with missing classmates. Families are trying to fix what was burned, broken, or lost. The emotional toll of war is often quieter than gunfire, but it lasts much, much longer. No politicians may sign papers in air-conditioned rooms. It's the common people who pay the price of their pride. So what does the future hold? Honestly, ... it's uncertain. This could be the beginning of a new chapter where both nations finally move past their ghosts. Or it could just be the end of round one, with round two waiting a few months or years down the line. That's why the world is watching. Not just ASEAN, but China, the US, the EU. Because every regional conflict holds global consequences. Trade routes, alliances, military strategies. One small war in Southeast Asia can shift the balance of entire regions. And so, as we end this deep dive into the Cambodia-Thailand conflict, remember this: peace is not the absence of war. It's the presence of justice, memory, and mutual respect. Without those things, even the quietest ceasefire is just a pause between battles. Only time will tell what this one truly is.